You know, there's some days that you feel like you've just fallen off, like you're going stale. I'm not gonna lie, I fell off in like 2019 and I've been trying to get back on ever since. I feel like my commentary videos, since I started doing them in like 2017 technically, but more so in 2018, have just been upbeat and often a little too goofy videos about the history of trains in the past, like the history of the government grain hoppers, BNSF heritage hoppers, Minecraft's minecarts, weed sprayer trains, just to name a few. I thought this time around I'd change things up a tiny bit. Let's get broken.
I just want to get real sad.
Let's yap about the fact that passenger rail in Canada sucks. It just absolutely blows chunks. It's absolute shit. As we all have been told 1,000 times by YouTubers like Amtrak Guy, Alan Fisher, Not Just Bikes, among others, passenger rail all across North America has been on the decline since at least the early 1960s, with the rise of cars and air travel. That's really the main problem why trains suck in North America. Governments have funded our countries into becoming a more auto-centric one with billions spent on road and highway upgrades, while train stations rot away. It's become a lot easier to congest roadways by driving across the city and country than to take a train. Why is that? Taking a look at Europe, they have some cargo trains, but most of them are passenger trains running all over the place. Even if the European rail network pales in comparison to North America's, they have so many more trains that get people around. For example, Germany improved their roadways while also working on their railways. The US, in comparison, pretty much stopped giving its rail network any attention after the 1950s. The main thing that, honestly not just Europe, but pretty much everyone else does better, is the cost of train tickets. Conversion rate aside, it costs you a lot less to travel on trains in the UK, the EU, and a few other places. That's the one thing we absolutely just suck at. For example, a round trip from London to Paris is roughly £99, while over here, taking Via's main long-distance route has tickets starting at a real affordable $377 a person, and that's just economy class. So complaining aside, because that's pretty much all this video is in my opinion, just me kind of yapping like I'm history in the dark going, "What are you doing?" What are some things that could be done to fix the problem of Canada's passenger rail network? First of all, more funding. Amtrak recently got a $10 billion federal grant to upgrade services and whatnot. Via got $462 million. To civilians, that's a lot of money, but for a railroad, that's just pocket change, to be honest. And most of that is going to the blasted Windsor corridor, As much as I will dog on the corridor for being the spoiled child in the Via family, it's where most Canadians live, unfortunately. As some people have suggested, we don't need to nationalize the rail network. Would it help? Maybe, I don't really think so. Honestly, I think privatizing Via as its own company, or at least creating a privately owned company to take over services Via makes the least money on, which is literally everything outside Toronto and Montreal, would make it a little more profitable. Like 1% more profitable. Instead of waiting on the government to give it crumbs worth of funding, it could maybe make better agreements for using track owned by CN and CP. Now on the topic of freight railways, PSR or Precision Scheduled Railroading, yeah, get
the fuck out of my show right now. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out of my show!
Despite what the bigwigs at every Class 1 railway says about it bringing in record quarterly profits, PSR has done nothing but cripple the rail industry by lengthening trains, streamlining road power to the point of constant power shortages, among other things. Personally, I feel like it's kind of contributed to the crews going on strike more often, as ever since this PSR profits first mentality has been implemented, there's been more shortages of crews across some systems, leading to crews having to relocate hundreds of miles away from their homes and families to fill positions they could easily just hire more people to alleviate that problem, among other things. But why I brought it up is this. Freight trains can easily get up to 14,000 feet long these days, and as you may know, railroads hate spending money. A lot of sidings on rail lines haven't been upgraded in decades at this point. Some on CN's Trans-Canada mainline are still around 6,000 feet long. There are rarely any trains these days that are that short, aside from track inspection trains, ballast and welded rail trains, or VIA. leading Via out west to be hours and sometimes a day or so late because of having to stop for tons and tons of 3-mile-long freight trains going by. Now, I get it, the tracks Via runs on are owned by private companies, but my suggestion is a mandated limit on how long freight trains could be, and most importantly, give passenger trains the highest priority. Next would be to increase service outside the corridor, or create new corridors. First off, there's too many cars on Vancouver Island. I think it'd be great if they upgraded the tracks and brought back RDC service. The stations are all still there, as I'm pretty sure service ended around 2010 or 2011. If you're from out in BC, feel free to comment on that topic. Calgary to Edmonton has been discussing a train between the two cities for a long time. I honestly don't think we need a fancy 300-mile-an-hour train out there, but what Via could do is, instead of scrapping the Genesis engines and LRC cars, upgrade existing or build new small stations along CP's main line between the two cities, and bring the old corridor fleet out west for that service. I think connecting big cities out there like maybe Lethbridge, Calgary, Red Deer, and Edmonton would be great. And of course, seeing as big cities like Sudbury, Thunder Bay, Brandon, Regina, Moose Jaw, and Calgary haven't seen regular train service in nearly 35 years, even though they still pay taxes for Via, I think it's time some shorter regional trains and maybe a few more frequent long distance routes came back. Like the original CP Canadian route. When CP ran it, it was just about 72 hours from Montreal to Vancouver. Under Via today from Toronto to Vancouver, it's about 97 hours. CN's more northerly route could be given another long distance train to supplement the Canadian, as this part of the route is still kind of crucial, as there's still a few communities along their line that only have rail service and rely on Via to transport goods. A lot of stations along CP's Trans-Canada route are still standing, like here in Winnipeg and Thunder Bay for example. All it would take is a little bit of interior redecorating, a couple platform tracks, funding of course, and boom, passenger service again, yay! International service would be awesome outside the corridor as well. Say if someone hated flying and wanted to go from Chicago to Edmonton and visit family or the mall or whatever. Right now they could either drive like 20 hours, take Amtrak's Empire Builder to Seattle, a Cascades train up to Vancouver, and then east on the always late Canadian for like a couple $1,000s. Even if you had something that connects Via's long distance train to Amtrak's train from, say, the Twin Cities in Minnesota to Winnipeg and then go from there. There were trains that did this, offered by Soo, Great Northern, and Northern Pacific, going from St. Paul to Winnipeg, but obviously, that was way before the respective roads ended service or were folded into Amtrak, and BN. Another idea would be seasonal trains. A few upgrades or restorations to tracks going to a couple popular beaches north of Winnipeg could bring in some extra revenue for people wanting to head to the beach or their cabins in the summer months. This was done years and years ago with CP and CN to places like Grand Beach and Winnipeg Beach back during the steam and very early diesel era. Alternatively, there could be trains to different resort locations like specifically just Edmonton to Jasper, Vancouver to Whistler, or Calgary to Banff. Speaking of Whistler, a few people in the Discord server were highly recommending more or just any trains through the BC interior like to Squamish and other places along the old BC Rail mainline. So going back to another big arrow to the knee of passenger trains, the prices of tickets. They're just too expensive for their own good. It's honestly just as expensive to fly, in some cases cheaper, from Toronto to Vancouver than to take a Via train. You ever hear the saying less is more? I think that's the best course of action for passenger trains. People love free stuff, but I mean, this sort of thing can't be free obviously. But people also love stuff that's cheap. I'm sure more people would be interested in train travel if it was more frequent and, more importantly, genuinely affordable. Lowering fares for shorter distance routes like the Windsor Corridor or whatever else outside it, like for example, a cheap daily shuttle from Winnipeg to Brandon or Selkirk, would benefit them with more people riding. More people, more money. I'm sure one of the reasons for high ticket prices these days is operating costs though. Now honestly, as it stands right now, I don't see Via going on for that much longer the way it is. I could see it just shrinking to a regional carrier along the corridor to connect Ontarians to services from TTC and GO in Toronto, and people from Calais de Tabarnak-land to EXO services in Montreal. And as for the rest of the country, there'll be, Ontario Northland, I guess, and, Rocky Mountaineer, I guess, that costs $1 million per person from Vancouver to Banff. As of right now, VIA only has maybe 4 regional trains, 2 in northern Manitoba, 2 in northern Quebec, and 1 from Jasper to Prince Rupert. And of course they've got the 2 long distance trains, the famous Canadian, and the Ocean from Montreal to Halifax. I think the regionals will stay, as some towns along their routes still to this day rely on the train to get people and goods in and out, as there's no highways to places like Churchill, Manitoba. But the long distance routes are probably gonna go. I definitely think it's a good idea to have another privately owned company that also handles freight, of course, but mainly would be in charge of services outside VIA's moneymaker, the Windsor Corridor. Canada needs, as the late great Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song about, a Canadian railroad trilogy. CN, CP, and someone new. Now, as much as I droned on about the negatives, not everything about passenger rail in Canada is bad though. It's still neat to see places of the country you can only see by rail, like going through the mountains of Alberta and BC, and the prehistoric rocks of the Canadian Shield throughout eastern Manitoba and all of northern Ontario, on some fantastic stainless steel equipment from a time where traveling by train was still a great way to travel and explore the country. Alrighty, hi everyone, this is the Winnipeg Rail Fan. Hopefully you made it this far without falling asleep or leaving an angry comment. To give a TLDR on this video, fixing the problem that is passenger rail in Canada, I'd suggest this. 1. Lower fares. 1.5. Stop treating train travel like air travel, man. 2. Increase service. 3. Give passenger trains top priority. 4. Shorten the lengths of freight trains, because I know railways don't want to spend more on upgrading siding lengths. And 5. Balanced funding of rail and road transportation. There's a couple other things I could have added, like upgrading track conditions to allow passenger and freight trains to go faster. Now this video, like some other videos I've done in the past, have sounded way better in my head than on a script, let alone a full-fledged video. And I've been thinking about doing this since at least 2021. I was digging through my hard drives recently and found a concept thumbnail for this video from like mid-2021 or something like that. I wonder how much worse the video would have been if I did it back then. Otherwise, if you enjoyed, leave a like, feel free to join the Discord server to discuss this more, and consider joining the channel as a member for exclusive members-only content, a shoutout at the end of most videos, and a special role in the aforementioned server. Yeah, I don't know, I'm still working on like membership stuff. Speaking of membership, shout out to the current members, Michigan Central Rail Fan, the Manitoba Rail Fan, and Transit Fan 2022. Well, I guess that's it. I'm gonna go hide from the pitchfork-wielding boomers about to leave the most angry comments, and as always, you know the drill. Be nice in the comments, don't diddle kids, don't derail trains for clout. See you next Tuesday.